Everybody's up and eating.
Taking in and analyzing all that sensory information.
They're cute.
Yeah, that one's...
Growing up on a farm is an experience like no other. From early morning routines to the smell of fresh hay. These experiences shape childhoods in ways that city living never could. Some of these memories, though simple, remain cherished and timeless, forever etched in the hearts of farm kids. Join us as we look at the 25 things only people who grew up on farms will remember. You know you're a farm kid when nothing quenches your thirst like a good gulp of hose water. After running around all day, sweating under the sun, that rubbery, slightly warm water felt like the best drink in the world. Who needed fancy bottled water when the garden hose was right there? City folks might turn their noses up at it, but farm kids know it had a special taste. It was a mix of sunshine, metal, and childhood memories. It didn't matter if it was a little too hot at first. You let it run, took a sip, and suddenly life was good again. And let's be honest, sometimes the hose doubled as a shower, a sprinkler, or even a tool for spraying down your siblings. It wasn't just water. It was farm life in liquid form. If you've ever tasted it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Farm kids were already up and moving before the sun even thought about rising. Sleeping in? Not a chance. The animals needed food.
For many years, farmers have been using scientific methods in their aim to obtain the best.
The cows needed milking, and the day just wouldn't wait. While other kids were hitting snooze, farm kids pulled on boots and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The sky was still dark, and the world was quiet except for roosters crowing and cows mooing. Sure, waking up early wasn't always fun, but it built something strong: work ethic, responsibility, and a deep love for the land. And let's not forget the reward: watching the sun rise while sipping a hot cup of coffee, or maybe just a big glass of fresh milk. Looking back, those early mornings weren't just chores. They were moments that shaped us, made us tough, and gave us memories no alarm clock could ever replace. Driving a tractor was a big deal on the farm. Before most kids learned to drive a car, farm kids handled tractors. At first, we just sat on a lap and held the wheel.
Castle itself became a farmyard, housing the equipment and livestock of Castle Farm.
Then came the real test: learning the pedals, shifting gears, and driving straight without messing up the field. Tractors weren't just for fun. They helped us with plowing, planting, and hauling heavy loads. Knowing how to use one meant you were trusted with real work. Some of us even had our favorite tractors, like they were part of the family. And let's be honest, nothing felt better than rolling down a dirt path, dust flying behind, and feeling like a pro. Once you learn, you never forget. Tractor skills stay with you for life. On the farm, harvest came first. Everything else waited. Weddings, birthdays, and vacations had to fit around the crops. If it was harvest time, you knew you had work to do. And the whole family helped. Days started early and ended late. There were tractors in the fields, trucks hauling grain, and hands covered in dirt. Meals were quick, often eaten outside or in the truck. Everyone knew their job, and no one stopped until the job was done. When the last load was brought in, then came the celebration. A big meal, maybe even a small gathering, but nothing too big, because farm work never really ended. Even in rest, the next season was already on our minds. Farm kids didn't learn about birth from books. We saw it with our own eyes. Whether it was a calf, piglet, or a puppy, new life was a part of farm life. Sometimes it was quick and easy. Other times it was slow and needed a helping hand. We learned to be patient and gentle, watching nature do its work. Seeing a wobbly newborn take its first steps was always special. But farm life also taught hard lessons. Not every birth ended well. Sometimes we lost one, and that was tough. But we learned to care, to try our best, and to respect life. Every birth was a reminder of how farm life never stops. There's always something new coming into the world. Farm life had many unforgettable smells, and one of the strangest? The smell of freshly cut silage fills the air. If you grew up on a farm, you knew when silage season arrived. The air filled with a strong, sweet, and sour smell.
This is September, we're putting in trench silo, and in February they'll be eating the same quality food.
Some found it too strong, but farm kids knew it meant full barns and well-fed animals. Tractors worked hard, cutting and packing the green, juicy feed. The smell stuck to your clothes, hands, and even your boots. You could be miles away, but one whiff of silage and you were right back on the farm. Even inside the house, that smell crept in through open windows. It mixed with fresh-cut hay and barn air, creating a scent only farm kids could understand. Today, catching that smell again brings back long days, hard work, and simple joys. It was a part of life, and we wouldn't trade it for anything. After that, navigating the farm was all about familiar landmarks. No GPS needed. On the farm, directions didn't come from street names or numbers. Instead, people used landmarks to guide others. They'd say things like, go past the big red barn, turn left at the old oak tree, and then follow the fence line. Everyone knew which farm had the tall silo or where the crooked fence stood. When a new neighbor moved in, they were referred to as the folks by the pond. Even animals played a role in giving directions, such as turn after the pasture with the black and white cows. It made perfect sense to farm kids. We didn't need a GPS or maps because we remembered every hill, field, and dirt road. If someone got lost, they weren't far from a neighbor who could set them straight. Life was simple, and finding your way was just part of growing up. Farm kids knew the sound of the milk truck before it even reached the driveway. The milkman arrived early in the morning while the world was still asleep. Some delivered fresh milk while others picked up what the farm had to sell.
Milkman can continue to bring us man's most perfect food, milk.
If you were up early, you could help carry the bottles. Some milkmen shared stories or even a little treat. Seeing them felt like a daily event, a small break before chores began. Fresh milk in glass bottles sat by the door, ready for breakfast. It was cold, creamy, and tasted better than anything from a store. The milkman was more than a delivery guy. He was part of the farm's daily rhythm. His visits were simple, but they left memories that farm kids still treasure. To a farm kid, hay bales were more than just animal food. They were playgrounds, forts, and places to climb, jump, and run. Stacked in long rows, they became obstacle courses.
Presses the hay into square or cylindrical shapes and then plops it on the ground for later pickup.
We tested our balance, daring each other to run across without falling. If the bales were round, rolling them down the field became a new game. The higher the stack, the better the adventure. Of course, hay bales weren't always fun. Loose hay scratched, and hidden mice made for sudden surprises. But none of that stopped us. We spent hours climbing, laughing, and making memories. When the work was done, the best part was lying back on a bale, feeling the warm sun, and knowing life on the farm was pretty daggone good. Nothing was more exciting than finding a fresh pile of sand on the farm. Whether for building, filling holes, or fixing something, farm kids saw it as an open invitation to play. We ran straight for it, leaving the first footprints before anyone else. Jumping, digging, and making tunnels felt like our own sandbox. Some buried their feet, while others made roads for toy trucks. The pile became anything our imagination allowed. Of course, the fun never lasted. As soon as the grown-ups arrived, the sand had a job to do. But for a little while, it belonged to us. Finding a new pile always felt like a surprise, and farm kids never wasted a chance to play. Picking out a fair heifer wasn't just about the looks, it took skill and patience. Picking a fair heifer wasn't just about choosing any calf. It took patience, knowledge, and a little bit of luck. Farm kids knew to look for strong legs, a good frame, and the right temperament. The goal was to find a calf that would grow well and stand out in the show ring. Once chosen, the real work began. Feeding, brushing, and halter training became part of daily chores. Walking her around, teaching her to stand still, and making sure she looked her best took time. The fair day was exciting, but also nerve-wracking. Standing in the ring, hoping for a ribbon, made all that work feel worth it. Win or lose, Farm kids took pride in their heifers because they weren't just animals, they were part of the family. Farm kids could fall asleep anywhere, making farm equipment the perfect spot. Whether it was the cab of a tractor, the back of a truck, or a pile of grain in a wagon. Tired kids found a way to nap. Long days in the sun, early mornings, and hours of work made rest feel good. Sometimes, the warm hum of an idling tractor rocked you right to sleep. Other times, waiting for Dad to finish in the field meant curling up at the combine and dozing off. It wasn't about comfort, it was about grabbing sleep whenever possible. A quick nap between chores would give just enough energy to finish the day. Farm kids knew that when work called, sleep had to wait. Before you rest too long, don't miss the treasures hiding in the rock pile. Rock piles were everywhere on the farm. But to farm kids, they were more than just a pile of stones. They held hidden treasures waiting to be found. After a rain, fresh rocks appeared, sometimes shaped like arrowheads or sparkling with quartz. If you looked hard enough, old tools, forgotten horseshoes, and even fossils turned up. Every rock pile was a little mystery, and every farm kid had a favorite spot to reach. Some rocks became keepsakes, while others got tossed into the fields. But the hunt never got old. It was a small adventure that turned an ordinary day into something special. Even now, farm kids can't pass a rock pile without taking a quick look. Nothing tasted better after a hot day of stacking hay than an ice cream sandwich. Hours of tossing heavy bales and sweating under the sun and getting covered in dust made that first cold bite feel amazing. Farm kids worked hard, knowing a treat waited at the end.
Now I am going to garnish this cake with some caramel.
The ice cream melted fast, dripping down their fingers, but no one cared. Sitting on the back of a truck or leaning against a hay bale was just the best reward. It wasn't just about the ice cream, it was about the feeling of a job well done. The barn was full, the work was finished, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. Those little rewards made the hard work worth it. City kids had no idea what they were in for when they met a bottle calf. Farm kids loved watching their friends react the first time a calf grabbed the bottle with a strong pull. Bottle calves were hungry and eager, their rough tongues and big eyes full of excitement. New visitors were always surprised by how strong they were.
Watch out, he'll bust that bottle so hard.
Sometimes the calf got a little too eager, knocking the bottle right out of their hands. It was always fun to share that part of farm life. Feeding a calf was simple, but it felt like something special to someone who had never done it before. Farm kids never forget their first bottle calf and love watching their friends experience it too. For farm kids, the school run wasn't about sleek cars or yellow buses. It often meant pulling up in a muddy truck, a cattle lorry, or even a tractor. While classmates arrived in spotless vehicles, farm kids stepped out smelling faintly of hay or silage. Sometimes running late with a classic excuse, had to check on a lamb. It wasn't the most glamorous way to arrive, but it was a rite of passage. The stares, the laughs, and the occasional, "What's that smell?" were all part of growing up on a farm, where duty came before appearances, and every trip to town was an adventure. For a farm kid, helping in the milking parlor felt like a big deal. The best part? Pressing the buttons. But those buttons were always just out of reach, so a parent or older sibling had to lift us. With little hands ready, we waited for the right moment. One push started the machine, and we watched the system come to life.
Gentle milking. It allows the cluster to hang freely, provides
The rhythmic sounds of pumps and milk flowing into the tanks became familiar. Even though it was a small job, it made us feel important. We weren't just watching, we were part of the process. That simple task turned into a farm memory we carried with us long after we could reach the buttons on our own. Few things cause more chaos than hearing, "The cows are out!" No matter what you were doing, you dropped everything and ran. Cows wandering off meant trouble. They could head for the road, stomp through the garden, or trample the neighbor's field.
Animals in the area of a frightful event. Subsequently, animals may get nervous.
Farm kids knew the drill. Grab a bucket, shake some feed, and try to herd them back before they got too far. Sometimes it was easy. Other times it turned into a full chase, with everyone yelling and waving arms. The relief of finally shutting the gate was the best feeling. It was the farm kids' version of an emergency. No sirens, no alarms, just that familiar shout that sent the whole family running. On the farm, the weather wasn't just talk. It decided everything. When to plant, harvest, and how the animals would do. Every morning started with a sky check. Was there rain coming? Was it too dry? A bad storm could ruin crops, and a cold snap could hurt newborn calves. Farm kids grew up hearing weather predictions at the breakfast table. Feels like rain's coming, or that wind's picking up, were as common as pass the salt. Even visiting town meant discussing the latest frost, drought, or heat wave. To this day, farm kids can't help but bring up the weather in a conversation. It's in our blood, and it always matters. Next, those summer hires on the farm always added a bit of excitement to the long days. Summertime meant extra hands on the farm, and sometimes those summer workers caught a farm kid's eye. Whether they were helping with hay, fixing fences, or working in the barn, there was something about a hard-working farm hand that made hearts beat faster. Maybe it was the way they tossed a bale with ease, or the way the sun hit their dusty face.
Mr. Maple has other fields ready to be cut, and some have been cut and are ready for the rake.
Of course, it was usually just a silly crush, a few glances, a little teasing, and maybe a chance to work side by side. Then summer ended, and so did the moment. Still, farm kids remember those summer hires. They were a small part of farm life, but for a few short months, they made the long, hot days a little more interesting. Every farm kid's heard the same question. Have you ever tipped a cow? City folks think it's real, but farm kids know better. Cows don't just stand there waiting to be pushed over. They're big, strong, and always aware of their surroundings. If you tried sneaking up on one, you'd likely end up running instead. A startled cow moves fast, and a well-placed kick could send you flying. Still, the myth lives on. Even after explaining why it doesn't work, someone always says, "Are you sure?" Farm kids just shake their heads and laugh. We may have spent nights out in the pasture, but it wasn't for tipping cows. It was for checking on them, watching the stars, and maybe playing a harmless prank on a younger sibling. Silage bunker plastic was meant to keep feed fresh, but for farm kids, it was an invitation for fun. Once the plastic was stretched over the pile, there was only one thing left to do: climb to the top and roll. Lying down, we tucked our arms and let gravity take over.
Only the required area is uncovered, leaving an airtight seal everywhere else.
The world spun as we tumbled down, laughing and yelling all the way. Sometimes we raced, other times we tried to steer, but always ended up at the bottom in a dizzy heap. Of course, once the fun was over, work had to be done. Tires, dirt, and old boards were placed to hold the plastic down. But for those few minutes, before the chores took over, the silage pile became the best slide a farm kid could ask for. What's the most important rule on the farm? Never leave a gate open. On the farm, leaving a gate open was the fastest way to get into trouble. One simple mistake could mean hours of chasing animals through fields, pastures, or even the neighbor's yard. Farm kids learned early to check every latch and chain before walking away. You'd hear about it if Dad or Grandpa found an open gate. "Were you born in a barn?" was a common scolding.
Especially these three. These three are massive. They're more like 4 months. We usually move them around 3 months old.
Some kids even habitually shut gates behind them, even when they were already closed. But the lesson stuck. Even years later, farm kids double-check doors, pens, and fences. It's just second nature. And if they see an open gate, they close it, because once you've spent a whole afternoon chasing loose cows, you never make that mistake again. City kids got to sleep in when snow covered the roads, but farm kids knew better. Snow or no snow, the animals still needed food, water, and care. Morning started with bundling up in layers. pulling on heavy boots and heading out into the freezing wind. Trudging through deep snow to feed cows and break frozen water troughs was normal. School might be canceled, but chores never were. By the time city kids were waking up, farm kids had already shoveled paths, carried hay, and warmed their hands over a barn heater. After chores, there was time for sledding or snowball fights, but only if the work was done first. Snow days weren't a break, they were just another day on the farm, and farm kids wouldn't have it any other way. On the farm, bale twine wasn't just for tying hay, it was the fix for almost anything. If something broke, chances were someone grabbed twine to hold it together, and if your fence wire snapped, tied with twine. A gate latch failed, twine worked just fine. Need a belt in a pinch? Wrap some twine around your waist.
PVC water coop attachments.
Farm kids saw it used for everything, from makeshift halters to quick repairs on machinery. Even years later, they kept the habit. A spare piece of twine in a truck or a pocket always came in handy. It wasn't fancy, but it got the job done. Other people bought fancy straps or special cords, but farm kids do. If you had a little bale twine, you could fix just about anything.